I was checking fence lines on the south edge of my ranch when I heard sirens. At first, I didn't think much of it. Living outside town, you hear emergency vehicles pass on the highway all the time. But these sirens weren't fading. They were getting closer. Gravel crunched. Tires slowed. Then a patrol SUV rolled to a stop just beyond my gate, lights flashing against the dry morning dust. I leaned on the fence post, confused, as the deputy stepped out. "Sir," he called, hand resting casually near his belt. "We got a 911 call reporting an unlawful occupant refusing to leave private property." I almost laughed. Almost. "This is my ranch," I said evenly. He nodded, still cautious. "That's what you're saying. The caller claims otherwise." The caller, as it turned out, was standing 20 yards behind the deputy, arms folded tight across her chest, sunglasses on despite the early sun. Perfect posture. Perfect scowl. She looked exactly like someone who expected authority to work automatically. "That's him," she said loudly. "He refuses to leave. I told dispatch he was trespassing." I glanced at her, then back at the deputy. Did she mention this property's been in my family for 3 generations? She cut in immediately. "That's irrelevant. This land is designated for community use. My son needs it cleared today." That was my first clue. This wasn't confusion. It was entitlement. I asked the deputy if I could see the call notes. He hesitated, then handed over his phone. The complaint was vague but dramatic. Armed male refusing to vacate ranch property. Potential threat. I raised an eyebrow and handed it back. "I'm unarmed," I said. "And I'm working." The woman scoffed. "You can say whatever you want. The HOA has authority here." That word again. HOA. I took a slow breath and asked her which HOA she represented. She rattled off a name I recognized immediately, the one that had been trying, unsuccessfully, to expand its influence beyond the subdivision line for years. "This ranch isn't part of your HOA, I said. "Never has been." She smiled tightly. "It will be." The deputy shifted his weight, clearly sensing tension. "Ma'am, do you have documentation showing ownership or jurisdiction?" She waved her phone. "I have emails. And maps. And my son's event is today. We were promised access." "Promised by whom?" She didn't say. I walked to my truck and pulled a folded deed from the glove box. Original parcel description. Boundary survey. Recorded and boring and very real. I handed it over without ceremony. The deputy reviewed it carefully. The woman leaned forward, impatience radiating off her. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "Why are we even entertaining him?" That's when she made her mistake. She turned to me and said, "If you don't leave right now, I'll have you arrested." I looked at the deputy, then back at her. "Ma'am," I said calmly, "you already called the wrong number for that." She frowned. "What does that mean?" Before I could answer, the deputy's radio crackled. Dispatch confirmed the address, the parcel ID, and the registered owner. The deputy handed me back my paperwork and nodded once, respectfully. "Yes, sir," he said. The woman froze. "Sir?" I finally straightened up and met her stare. "You might want to hang up on your next call," I said, "because you're standing on the ranch of the county sheriff." And that was the moment her confidence collapsed, even though she didn't yet understand just how badly she'd misplayed the morning. The deputy didn't arrest me. He didn't even ask me to step away from the fence. But he also didn't leave right away, and that's when things started to twist. He turned back to the woman and asked a few follow-up questions. Simple ones. Who owned the land? Who had granted permission? What exactly did she believe gave her authority to remove me? Each answer she gave was longer, louder, and less specific than the last. Emails. Verbal agreements. Community expectations. None of it amounted to anything concrete. She kept circling back to her son. "He's already invited people," she said, voice tight with irritation. "We need this area today. He's been planning this for weeks." I asked, calmly, what exactly her son planned to do on my ranch. She hesitated just long enough to give herself away. "That's not your concern." It was very much my concern. The deputy asked if her son was present. She said no. Asked if any HOA representative with legal authority was present. She said she was the authority. Asked if she had a deed, lease, or easement document. She snapped that she didn't need one. That's when the pressure shifted. The woman's tone changed from confident to sharp, then to indignant. She accused the deputy of wasting time. She accused me of intimidating her. She even hinted that she felt unsafe, despite the fact that I hadn't raised my voice or moved from my side of the fence. I watched the deputy's posture change. His shoulders stiffened. His expression flattened. He'd heard this routine before. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "making a false or exaggerated 911 report is a serious matter." She laughed. Actually laughed. I was protecting my community. That phrase hung in the air longer than it deserved. I asked the deputy if he wanted me to step away so he could finish. He shook his head slightly. "You're fine where you are." That small acknowledgement said more than words. The woman pulled out her phone and began recording, narrating loudly about harassment and abuse of power. She angled the camera toward me, trying to provoke something. I didn't give her anything. No reaction. No correction. No interruption. Silence unsettles people like her. She then turned the camera back to the deputy. "Say it again," she demanded. "Say you're refusing to remove him." "I'm not refusing," the deputy replied. "There's no legal basis to do so." That was the moment she realized this wasn't going her way. Her voice dropped, sharper now. "Then call your supervisor." The deputy nodded and did exactly that. While we waited, she paced along the fence line, talking about property values, community standards, and how people like me didn't understand cooperation. She never once mentioned the law. She never once asked if she might be mistaken. When the supervisor arrived, the scene repeated itself, with even less patience. Documentation was reviewed. Boundaries were confirmed. The supervisor glanced at me, then at the deputy, then back at the woman. "Ma'am," he said, "this ranch is not part of your HOA, and you do not have authority here." Her face flushed. "Then why was I told?" "I can't speak to who told you what," he interrupted. "But this call ends now." She opened her mouth to argue again. That's when I finally spoke. "You've been trying to take control of this land for years," I said quietly. "You just decided to do it through 911 today." Every eye turned to her. She didn't deny it. And in that silence, it became clear this wasn't an accident, or a misunderstanding, or even a bad morning. It was a deliberate attempt to use emergency services as leverage. The supervisors exchanged a look. The deputy shifted his stance. And the woman, for the first time since she arrived, looked uncertain. That uncertainty was the beginning of everything unraveling. The supervisor asked the woman to step aside while he spoke quietly with the deputy, and whatever was said between them was brief, controlled, and decisive, because when he turned back toward her, the tone had shifted from discussion to conclusion. He told her the call was being documented as unfounded, that she had no legal authority over the property, and that any further attempts to remove me could result in consequences, a word that visibly irritated her as she demanded to know if they were really letting him stay, only to be told plainly that they were recognizing lawful ownership and ending the call. She scanned the scene as if expecting someone to rescue her position, but there was no one, just open land, quiet fences, and a situation she could no longer bend. She tried to regain control by declaring it wasn't over and that the HOA would handle it, which was when I calmly told her this was exactly what handling it looked like. The deputy relaxed slightly. The supervisor apologized for the disruption and told me to contact him directly if there were any further issues, not dispatch, a detail she clearly heard as her expression tightened before she shoved her phone into her pocket and walked back to her SUV without apology or acknowledgement. As she drove away, the deputy lingered and asked if I wanted to file a report, and after a moment of weighing effort against importance, I said yes, because documentation matters. Sitting on the tailgate of his unit, I explained the pattern of HOA emails, boundary pressure, and repeated attempts to claim access that didn't exist, and his pen slowed when I clarified this wasn't the first time, just the first time she'd escalated to 911. He finished the report, handed me a card with a case number, and told me to reference it if she contacted me again. After they left, the ranch felt quieter. Not peaceful but alert, the kind of stillness that follows a near miss. I walked the fence line she'd pointed at earlier, checking posts and gates, finding everything exactly where it belonged, unchanged by her assumptions. Later that afternoon, an HOA email arrived, polite, carefully phrased, requesting a meeting to clarify misunderstandings regarding jurisdiction and community use. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to my county email, tagged it, and added it to a growing file, because this was no longer about one woman or one morning, but about a board that believed persistence could replace permission and authority could be manufactured through pressure. Calling 911 had been her escalation, and it had failed, and once a line like that is crossed and documented, there's no pretending it didn't happen. She had tried to use authority as a weapon, not realizing that authority only works when it's real, and from that moment forward, everything she did would be measured against a record she could no longer control. The meeting request didn't surprise me, but the timing did. Less than 24 hours after the 911 call failed, the HOA suddenly wanted to clarify misunderstandings. That word, misunderstandings, was doing a lot of work. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I let the silence stretch, because silence has a way of forcing people to reveal how badly they need an answer. By the next morning, a second email arrived. Then a third. Each one more careful than the last. No accusations. No demands. Just concern. Cooperation. A desire to move forward positively. I forwarded every message to the same folder and kept working. Fences don't care about politics, and neither does paperwork. Behind the scenes, things were already shifting. The deputy's report triggered an internal review, not because I asked for one, but because misuse of emergency services automatically does. The call recording was pulled. The dispatcher's notes were reviewed. Words like armed and threat didn't age well when paired with body cam footage showing a calm man standing on his own land. 2 days later, I received a call from county legal. They didn't ask what happened. They asked how far it went back. I explained the history, years of pressure, informal requests, boundary suggestions that always seemed to drift outward, never inward. Attempts to involve the HOA in land that wasn't theirs. Emails that danced around ownership without ever challenging it directly. The call ended with a simple assurance. Everything would be documented. That assurance mattered. The HOA finally changed tactics. Instead of emails, they sent a certified letter requesting mediation. Formal. Polished. Signed by their attorney. It proposed a neutral location and emphasized a desire to avoid unnecessary conflict. I noticed what it didn't include. Any claim of authority over my ranch. That was the concession. I agreed to mediation on my terms. My attorney would attend. The county would be notified. And the subject would be limited strictly to jurisdictional boundaries and future contact. Nothing else. No community access. No shared use fantasies. Just lines on a map and the law that supported them. The mediation itself was uneventful, which is exactly how you know it went badly for the other side. Their attorneys spoke carefully, avoiding absolutes. Their board representatives avoided eye contact. The woman who made the 911 call wasn't present at all. I didn't ask why. Maps were placed on the table. Deeds were referenced. Surveys were confirmed. Every attempt they made to frame the ranch as adjacent, connected, or impliedly included was shut down with a document. Calmly. Repeatedly. At one point, their attorney suggested future cooperation might include informal understanding regarding access. My attorney declined on my behalf before I could speak. There will be no informal understanding, he said. There will be written boundaries and no contact beyond them. That ended the conversation. Within a week, the HOA sent out a community-wide email clarifying that the ranch was not, and never had been, part of the association, and that any claims to the contrary were incorrect. It was framed as an administrative clarification, not an admission of wrongdoing, but the effect was the same. The story changed. Quietly. The board member who had called 911 resigned shortly afterward, citing personal reasons. No farewell. No explanation. Just gone. The board restructured. A new compliance officer was appointed. Procedures were updated. None of that mattered as much as what didn't happen. No one contacted me again. No one stepped near the fence. No one suggested access. The pressure vanished the moment it was exposed to daylight and documentation. Authority that relies on intimidation collapses when it's forced to explain itself in writing. I returned to my routines, working land that had never stopped being mine, maintaining boundaries that now felt sharper, clearer. The ranch hadn't changed. The people around it had. Calling 911 had been their attempt to force control instantly. Mediation, resignation, and silence were the consequences of failing. And as I closed the gate one evening, watching dust settle along the fence line, it was obvious the balance had shifted for good. Not because I demanded it, but because the system finally did what it was designed to do when someone tried to abuse it. By the time the dust finally settled, nothing about the ranch looked different, but everything about how it was treated had changed. The fences were the same. The gates still creaked the same way in the wind. The land hadn't moved an inch. What had shifted was the assumption that someone else could decide what happened on it just by saying so loudly enough. The HOA never contacted me again. Not with complaints. Not with clarifications. Not with invitations to meetings or attempts at cooperation. Their silence was deliberate, and it was permanent. The county, on the other hand, followed through exactly as promised. The 911 call remained on record, labeled unfounded. The report I'd filed stayed open as documentation, not because anyone expected further trouble, but because history has a way of repeating itself when people believe time erases paper trails. Neighbors eventually heard what happened. Stories like that don't stay contained, especially in rural communities. Some asked directly. Others hinted. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I told them exactly what occurred, step by step, and let the facts do what facts usually do when they're clear. A few people admitted they'd been pressured by the same board over property lines that were never actually in question. Others realized, maybe for the first time, that confidence doesn't equal authority. What stayed with me wasn't the confrontation itself, but how quickly it escalated once entitlement met resistance. The decision to call 911 hadn't been emotional. It had been strategic. She believed emergency services would force compliance before questions could be asked. She believed urgency would override ownership. That assumption was the real mistake. I kept doing my job. Patrolling the county. Answering calls. Enforcing laws the same way I always had, by statute, not by attitude. No one treated me differently because of the incident, and I didn't expect them to. Respect earned through clarity lasts longer than respect demanded through fear. Every so often, I'd pass the edge of the subdivision that bordered my land. The same signs. The same roads. But no new markers. No creeping expansions. No talk of shared use or community need. The boundary was finally being treated as what it always was, final. The irony wasn't lost on me. If she'd simply asked, calmly, honestly, nothing would have happened at all. I would have said no, politely, and gone back to my work. Instead, she chose escalation, believing authority could be borrowed by dialing 3 numbers. What she learned instead was that authority only works when it's grounded in truth and accountability. People sometimes ask if I regret filing the report, if it felt excessive. It didn't. Documentation isn't punishment. It's protection. Not just for me, but for the next person who might have been pressured the same way. Systems only correct themselves when there's a record of why they need to. Life on the ranch returned to its rhythm. Sunrises. Fences. Long days that ended the same way they began. Quietly. No drama. No sirens. Just land being land. Every once in a while, I think back to that morning and how confident she looked when she stepped out of her vehicle, convinced the situation would bend in her favor. Confidence built on assumption collapses fast when it meets reality. Especially when reality is documented, witnessed, and unwilling to move. Calling 911 was supposed to make me leave. Instead, it made everything unmistakably clear. The ranch was mine. The law was the law. And the line she tried to cross wasn't just visible, it was permanent.